about Africa south of the Sahara. You are isolated from the centers of power. There is no internal problem, there is no internal urge in the United States or in Europe or in Japan to help Africa. None. And I think to some extent the age of imperialism has gone. So you could easily be forgotten. Africa is of interest when we are killing one another. We arouse a lot of interest. If we want to appear in European on European television, we can cause more trouble somewhere. Africa south of the Sahara is isolated. Africa south of the Sahara, in the world of today, is on its own. But I go out, and sometimes I get annoyed, but sometimes I don't get annoyed. Here I am, former president of my country, no problem in Tanzania. We've never had these problems that they have. But I'm an African, and they see me, they ask me the problems of Rwanda. I said, but I don't come from Rwanda. But you come from Africa.
What's the difference?
But I don't meet everybody. I don't meet an Englishman somewhere. If Blair was to come to Dar es Salaam, I don't ask him what is happening in Bosnia. It never occurs to me. I should ask Blair, what is happening to you Europeans because of what is happening in If President Kohl was to come somewhere, I don't ask him what is happening in Chechnya. Well, Kohl could say, why are you asking me anything about Chechnya? I don't know what is happening in Chechnya. But this is not true about Africa. About Africa, Mr. President, you go, here you are, trying to build something which is a tremendous experience. But perhaps you are different, because sometimes they think South Africa is different. So perhaps they would say, but this is President Mandela, this is different, it's not... But for the likes of me, no, I'm an African. And I say sometimes I get irritated, but then I say, why? Why do I get irritated? Because, of course I'm a Tanzanian, but what is this Tanzania? What is this Tanzania? Why should these Europeans see me as a Tanzanian? What is this Tanzania? This is something we tried to create in my lifetime. I built Tanzania. So what is this Tanzania? The Europeans are right. The North Americans are right to look at me as an African. It is true that in the third world we talk a great deal about economic development, about expanding the number of goods and services and the capacity to produce them. But the goods are needed to serve men. Services are required to make the lives of men more useful, more easeful, and more fruitful. Political, social, and economic organization is needed to enlarge the freedom and dignity of men. Always we come back to man, liberated man, as the purpose of activity, the purpose of development. But man can only liberate himself or develop himself. He cannot be liberated
or developed by another. For man makes himself. It is his ability to act deliberately for a self-determined purpose which distinguishes him from other animals. The expansion of his own consciousness and therefore of his own power over himself, over his environment and his society must therefore ultimately be what we mean by development. The same is true of education. Its purpose is the liberation of man from the strains and limitations of ignorance and dependence. Education has to increase men's physical and mental freedom, to increase their control over themselves, their own lives, and the environment in which they live. The ideas imparted by education or released in the mind through education should therefore be liberating ideas. The skills acquired by education should be liberating skills. Nothing else can properly be called education. Any teaching which induces a slave mentality or a sense of impotence is not education at all. It is an attack on the minds of men. This means that adult education has to be directed at helping men to develop themselves. It has to contribute to an enlargement of man's ability in every way. In particular, it has to help men to decide for themselves, in cooperation, what development is. It must help men to think clearly. It must enable them to examine the possible alternative courses of action, to make a choice between those alternatives in keeping with their own purposes, and it must equip them with the ability to translate their decisions into reality. The personal and physical aspects of development cannot be separated. It is in the process of deciding for himself what is development and deciding in what direction it should take his society and implementing those decisions that man develops himself. There is another aspect to this. A man learns because he wants to do something. And once he has started along this road of developing his capacity, he also learns because he wants to be a more conscious and understanding person. Learning has not liberated a man if all he learns to want is a certificate on his wall and the reputation of being a learned person, a possessor of knowledge. For such a desire is merely another aspect of the disease of the acquisitive society, the accumulation of goods for the sake of accumulating them. The accumulation of knowledge, or worse still, the accumulation of pieces of paper which represent a kind of legal tender for such knowledge, has nothing to do with development. Adult education is not something which can deal with just agriculture or health or literacy or mechanical skill and so on. All these separate branches of education are related to the total life a man is living and to the man he is and will become or is becoming. Learning how best to grow soya beans is of little use to a man if it is not combined with learning about nutrition or the existence of a market for beans. This means, therefore, that adult education will promote change.